Hi, my name is Jason Martin. I'm a percussion instructor. And what I kind of want to talk about today and the time that we have in this is a little bit about an approach to playing on a drum and how to hold the stick and some hand positions, and an approach to the drum set that I found that really works for me and some of my students. So basically, the first thing that we need to talk about is how to hold the drumstick. And in any grip, there's a lot of different ways to hold a drumstick, but in any grip that you use, one thing that it all has in common is what's called a fulcrum, and that's basically just a balance point on the drumstick and your grip point. So, in what's considered common, the most used grip probably these days is called match grip, and that's where both hands look the same. And I'll demonstrate it just with my right hand at first. And your fulcrum point is between your thumb and your index finger, so like this. Okay, and you want those fingers across from each other. So on the drumstick, it would be like that. Okay, and then these other fingers just gently underneath. Now you don't want to choke the drumstick by squeezing. Okay, I have a lot of students who come in at first and they have blisters and all kinds of problems. But basically what you want to do is have this motion in the drumstick. Okay. Now, when you make a stroke, it's all from the wrist for right now. And of course, I'm going to try to generalize some of this stuff in a actual lesson, one-on-one lesson with me. I can go into more detail with all of these things, but here I'm going to try to generalize it. So it's all made from the wrist, from an up-down motion. And some students I'll have, for their very first lesson, I'll have them just hold the stick in their fulcrum, and then just practice going down and up, and just making this motion. Now, what I was saying earlier was that there's different ways to hold the drumstick. There's a lot of different grips and things like that. And some, like say for example, I use what's called traditional grip in my left hand. So I'm using the match grip position in my right, and then in my left hand, I hold it like this. And even though it's quite a different grip, I still have that fulcrum point between my thumb and my index finger here, if you can see that. So it's like this. So just like in match grip, it's here. In traditional grip, it's right here. Okay, and then for making this stroke, it's from the turning of my forearm. So in match grip, it's up and down, like that. And then in traditional grip, it's like, say, unscrewing a light bulb, that kind of motion, or turning a page. And then what you basically want to do is practice these motions first. That's what I would first show the student, these motions. And also with this, it's where you're holding the drumstick at too. So if you take a drumstick and you try holding it on different spots on the stick, you're going to feel what we call rebound. And if say if you go to extremes at first and you hold the drumstick all the way at the back, and you just drop the stick on the drum or on the practice pad or whatever you're using, and you could feel it feels terrible. It's like having a rock attached to the end of the drumstick. So you see I barely get any action off of this. Now if I come into the middle too far, then it's too even. So if you see, if I can do this, it doesn't want to do anything. Right, but if I try and find that spot on the drumstick, so here how you can test this is hold it in the fulcrum and just drop it on your practice pad and just see how much bounce you get, because we are going to be using this. Right, now you see there, and then here in traditional grip, if you're going to use traditional grip, you just hold it just in the fulcrum spot that we talked about and try the different positions on the stick again. So again, too far back, it's going to be very heavy So you see I don't really get much out of that. And I get these fingers out of the way. It's just my fulcrum point that I'm holding it in. Okay, too far in the middle. It's too back heavy now. I can't get it to rebound. And then about in this spot on the stick right here, now I start to get the rebound. And that's what I want to use. Now for match grip players, if you want to do that, you just basically hold the stick, the same thing as you were doing in your right, you do in your left. Okay. I haven't used match grip in a long time. I personally use the traditional style 100% of the time when I play. So, but for match grip players, you just apply your right hand, same thing on your left hand. Now, what I want to lead into is some people call this the full stroke. So after you understand the position on the stick and the grip and how your fingers are, right? Remember, you want this motion in the back. The next thing to lead into is, well, even before actually the full stroke, we can also talk about the hand positions, and it's how your body's made. It should be nothing, crazy or weird. I'm not playing like this, I'm not making fists like this. My hand isn't in any unusual position. Now, generally what I use, say in my right hand, is what they call German position, where you see that my palm is facing down to the ground and my hand is on top of the drumstick. So you see how it all kind of is a straight line here. Now, again, that motion is just this, right? Straight up and down. Now, some drummers use what they call French position or French timpani grip, and all you do is you just bring your palm or your hand underneath, and see now that my thumb is on top of the stick and it's like this. So it's more, the stick is kind of more pointing at me now. And this is really for fingers, and again, we're not really going to get into that on this lesson. That's something that I can discuss more in detail in an actual lesson. But the fingers are right directly underneath the drumstick. And then in between those positions, they have what they call American position. And I guess I kind of use more or less American position, where it's kind of off to the side. So it's not totally German, German position, say in match grip, would make like a V. And some band directors push this, to make a V when you play. But whatever works for you, there is no real right or wrong answer with this. So, and as I was saying real quick too, there's many different ways to hold the drumstick, but one thing that they all have in common is that fulcrum point again. Now, I was showing you the traditional grip, right, in the left hand. Now, traditional grip in the right hand, in the old days, a long, long time ago, they actually used to hold the drumstick from these back two fingers. So just as much as I was saying the modern fulcrum is between these, your thumb and your index finger, in the old days, they used to hold it way far in the back from your ring finger and your pinky. And you could practice this, these three fingers just dangle. They don't do anything. They're much like the back three fingers here. But these three fingers just dangle. And you can practice fulcruming from between these two fingers back here and your palm. But it takes some work, right? But whatever grip, works for you. And in fact, they used to use off to the side and almost kind of hold the drumstick in a tight fist, and they would play that same motion that I was using in traditional grip here, like the unscrewing the light bulb motion, right? They used to do this. So I don't really use this. Sometimes I might switch to these back fingers, but it'll still be straight up and down instead of off to the side. But again, I'm kind of generalizing, and we can get into this in an actual lesson. So let's stick with our traditional, or rather I should say our modern fulcrum in these two fingers here. And then what a lot of drummers don't understand is how to actually make a stroke on a drum and to actually use this rebound. That's why the fulcrum point is so important, because if I don't have this fulcrum point, I'm not going to get that rebound that we talked about earlier. And again, test different spots on your drumstick. Every stick is different, so you're going to get a different reaction, right? And then traditional grip. Or if you're going to use match grip, you just same position as your right hand, like so. But hitting a drum now, I have some students who come in and they squeeze the drumstick and they play down into the drum like this, and they stop the stick. And what this does is this just promotes tension and just promotes friction. So I've had students in the past who have come in and they have blisters all over their hands, blood blisters, and you know, their arms hurt, or they get carpal tunnel syndrome, and that's all bad news. So instead of squeezing the drumstick and playing down into it, what you should practice is what they call the full stroke. Some people call this the Gladstone stroke or the free stroke. And what I do is I start in the up position, so basically 12 o'clock position with the drumstick. And I have my fulcrum, and then these fingers I kind of just let very loose, because again, I want this motion. I want to create a pocket that the stick can move in between my palm and my fingers in the back here. And I just want it to move in that, if you can see that. So what you want to practice though, once you get this motion down, is throwing the stick at the practice pad and just letting it bounce back up. Now I say to my students that it's just like bouncing a ball, and that's exactly what's happening here. I'm letting the rebound push the drumstick back up for me. So in other words, I'm not going down and stopping the drumstick and then lifting it back up from my wrist. I'm just stroking down from my wrist, almost throw the stick down. The harder that you throw the stick down to the surface, the more profound that rebound and pushing it back up is going to be. So if I start in this position, but I don't put enough force into it, you see how it doesn't have enough force to push it back up. And all this really is just physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the amount of force that I put into the drumstick is going to be the force that it's going to come back up with. So here I don't have enough force. Here I have enough force. I'm throwing it down, and I'm loose back here, because if I squeeze the drumstick and do this, it's not going to do anything. Right? Just like that. But if I loosen up these back fingers, not my fulcrum, that's always going to be intact. If I loosen up these back fingers, then you see what happens. And this is a loud wrist stroke. Now in an actual lesson with me, I would talk about, this is a whole series actually. I would start with this, and we would talk about this first. But to get louder, if you need to get louder than this, you can. You can add your forearm. They call it a straight forearm throw, so it's not really from the wrist anymore. Right? Or there's also the molar stroke, which again in an actual lesson we can get into detail with that. But first just practice the full stroke and throw it down and allow why this takes so much practice is to just train your muscles and your hand to allow the drumstick to rebound back up to you. And also in traditional grip, which is what I use, but remember, match grip players, just same thing in your left hand as the right. So what I'm doing here in the right stick, you just would do the same thing in your left. But traditional grip, again, up to about 12 o'clock. This is something that I'm still working on myself, so I'm still trying to get my wrist all the way back, so it's up to that 12 o'clock position. But again, I hold it in my fulcrum, and I am loose enough to where I'm going to allow the drumstick to rebound back. And in fact, if I just hold it in my fulcrum like this, you could hopefully see that how the stick just shoots back. And if when you're doing this and it shoots out of your hand, and that's fine, you just go pick it up and keep practicing it. At some point you won't do that anymore. But at least you know that you don't have such a tight grip to the point where it's not going to happen. So loose is where it's at. You can't squeeze the drumstick, and that's what a lot of drummers have kind of a problem with. And actually, here on this drumstick, you see that what I started using was these things called gig grips. You don't have to use these. I don't necessarily recommend them. It's just something I like to use on a gig. If my hands get sweaty or whatever, I could still have a really loose grip without worrying about dropping the drumstick. So I just kind of slide my finger under this. Don't need it in my left hand, but more my right stick. And then there, so I could play, you know, open-handed, but I still have a fulcrum. I still have this pocket that we talked about, and I just allow the drumstick to rebound. So, but really all that gig grip really does for me, the reason I like to use them is so I can have such a loose grip without worrying about dropping the stick. Because, you know, practice is one thing, but you don't really want to drop the drumstick on a gig. Okay, and then good exercises for this, what I recommend to my students is to use a book called Stick Control by George Lawrence Stone. And basically the first 3 pages, I believe it is, 5, 6, and 7, there's 72 exercises of just single strokes. Now, so like for instance, number 1 is just alternating between right and left hands. But again, I shoot for trying to get that rebound. And as you work through it, then it starts to develop the left hand. So most people are right-handed, I believe, so a lot of drummers complain about their left hands being weaker. I'm actually right-handed, but I lead left hand, which we're going to talk about on the set here. And it actually feels like my right hand isn't quite as up to par as my left is. So I'm kind of backwards with that. But again, it's something I'm still working on, and a lot of drummers I know still work on this stuff. But then say out of stick control again, then say number 2 is starting with your left stick. But again, being loose enough to allow that stick to be pushed back up. Right, and then they get into double strokes, you know, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. And it just really, that book is excellent because it really just develops both of your hands, which when we get on the set here, we're gonna talk about that. So the other benefit of this, like I said, this is a series of lessons, but what I also really want to talk about here was the benefits of practicing this and allowing the rebound to happen is inherent in the control of your level or your dynamic, how loud or soft you play. So I have some students, again, when they come in for a lesson and they squeeze the stick and they play like this, and then they say, well, how do I play quieter? They don't understand, you know, and I basically tell them, look at how far back you're coming from. If you look at that, as soon as I raise my arm, look at how far back I'm coming from. I mean, this is really far away. So basically the distance of the stick to the surface has direct relationship to the volume. So if I'm coming from this far back or even farther back, that's going to be loud. So when I show students this, then we talk about half stroke after they kind of master the full stroke. And all that is you just cut the stroke in half. So instead of coming from 12 o'clock, you bring it halfway down, and then you work on that. Work on developing that sensitivity in your hand and the drumstick to allow the stick to bounce back up to this level. And this is a quieter dynamic. It's a softer sound. Just like so. And then in, say, in traditional grip, it's the same thing. If this is full stroke position, you just cut that in half. Because there's lots of gigs that I've played on where it's volume sensitive. You know, I can't play that loud. But after studying this and working on it, and as I continue to work on it today, those gigs are a piece of cake now. Some of the best gigs I ever played weren't how much it paid me, it was what I learned out of it. And that was one of the things that I learned a long time ago, was because I used to play into the drum, you know, and squeeze the drumstick down into it. And I found it real difficult to play, especially rock and things like that, at a quieter dynamic level. I didn't understand how to do it. But with this system, you know, if I need to play loud, I just play a full stroke. To play quieter, I just cut it in half. So this isn't going to be as loud because it's not coming as far back of a distance as, say, the full stroke is. And then, you know, there's a lot of nuances with this too. We're just looking at 2 positions, full and half. But I mean, you got all this space here. You know, when I play a gig, I might not necessarily do a full stroke 12 o'clock position. I mean, I'll try and practice that way. But, you know, sometimes depending on what I'm playing and the gig and the venue and all that and what song it is, you know, this might be my full stroke. So instead of it being all the way up, it might only come from here, because that might be all that I need, you know, volume-wise. But, I mean, then you can look at low strokes, you know, for quieter playing. And this is very useful for students in school band, marching band, and then it's useful for drum set playing too. So this section, I guess that's kind of what I wanted to cover right now. And like I said, I'm kind of generalizing this. Everybody's different. Everybody's body is different. Their hand sizes and all that. So, and all of this stuff we can get more into detail with on an actual lesson. So what I want to get into next is how to apply some of these ideas to actual drum set playing. And show you useful ways to use this, because it's not just exercises for the practice pad. You know, you want to be able to use this stuff musically. So let's move over to the set, and then I'll see you there.